Tyshawn Lee was murdered in probably the most abhorrent, cowardly, unfathomable crime that I've witnessed in 35 years of policing.
Police think this boy's shooting may have been in retaliation for several recent gang murders. Tonight, a source says that investigators think the boy's father may have more information but isn't being forthcoming.
And I just want justice for my son. Whoever know anything, please let the police know.
I love Tyshawn like it was my own, and I want whoever did this to turn yourself in. You don't deserve this.
How in the heck has one of America's greatest cities allowed violence to spiral this far out of control? I'm not sure what the heck is going on in Chicago or how it even became so bad, but when I was coming up, the real gangsters lived by code. You don't mess with grandparents, mothers, and definitely not the little people. It just seems like in these days, everything goes. In today's video, you will hear about one of the most disturbing, senseless, and ruthless acts of violence a person could ever commit. Good day, family. I am the Mysterious Black Bandit, and before we jump into this video, y'all already know what you need to do. Hit that like, subscribe, and turn those notifications on so you don't miss out on any of these videos when I upload. Once you've done that, let's get this video started. On November 2nd, 2015, Tyshawn Lee was in his classroom anxiously watching those final minutes before school let out so he and his friend could go to the park to play some basketball. As the bell rang, Tyshawn hurried home so he didn't waste any time getting to the court, but before he could go, he had to get permission from his grandmother. So once he made it to the house, he walked in and spoke to her as usual, then asked if it was okay for him to go to the Dawes Park with one of his friends to play some basketball. Knowing how bad the area was, his grandmother was a little skeptical at first, but she knew how much he loved to play, so she decided to go ahead and let him go. Tyshawn runs and grabs his basketball, and just before leaving out the door, he turns around and says, "I love you, Grandmama. I'll be back." But sadly, this will be the last time she will see him alive. Once Tyshawn and his friend made it to the Dawes, which was a public park on the south side of Chicago, they began shooting around and played a few games of basketball, then headed over to the playground area to get on the swings. Now, while they were on the swings, 22-year-old Dwight Boone-Doty picked up Tyshawn's basketball and began dribbling it while asking if he wanted to come play a few games with him. Not thinking anything of it, Tyshawn walks back over to the court and begins playing a few games with him. But shortly afterwards, Dwight asked if he wanted to go to the store with him. Tyshawn didn't have any money, so he rejected, but this is when Dwight told him he would buy him anything he wanted. Once his trust was gained, Tyshawn began to follow Dwight into an alley near 80th Street and Damien Avenue, and by the time they reached the middle of the alley, Dwight pulled out a .40 caliber handgun and Tyshawn in broad daylight. Afterwards, Dwight takes off running and jumps into a black SUV, leaving Tyshawn on the ground to pass away. Now, Tyshawn's uncle, who lived nearby, heard the gunshot and came out to investigate, and this is when he saw his nephew lying on the ground, no longer breathing. Once the ambulance arrived, they rushed Tyshawn to a nearby hospital, but by this time, it was too late and he was pronounced dead. This senseless was stemmed from an ongoing gang war between the Black Peace Zone and the Killer Ward gang. Allegedly, Tyshawn's father, Pierre Stokes, was a member of one of their rival gangs, and just 2 weeks before, allegedly, he shot and killed 25-year-old Tracey Morgan while sitting in the car with his mother, who was also wounded in the attack. This broke the gang code, which mandated that innocent family members be left out of any of their disputes. So after this went down, Tracey's brother, Corey Morgan, planned to retaliate by going for any of his family members he could find. They even went as far as to setting up surveillance at Tyshawn's grandmother's house just to draw out their rivals. Now, once the investigation started, the police spoke with several witnesses that described seeing 3 men at the park and the clothing Corey Morgan was wearing on that day. This attack on Tyshawn gained nationwide attention and sparked multiple protests throughout the city, with his mother, Carla Lee, demanding justice for him. So the police were under intense pressure to make an arrest in this case. Then on November 25th, 2019, just 3 weeks later, Corey was arrested and subsequently charged with Tyshawn's murder, and in March of 2016, Dwight Boone-Doty was arrested on the same charges. Now, with them arresting the victim so soon, they kind of hoped that it would bring some level of closure to his family and friends, but instead, Tyshawn's 25-year-old father found out where one of his son's murderer's girlfriend was, aimed a gun at her and said, "I'm going to kill you, B-word," then started shooting. Fortunately, she survived only with a graze to the face, but 2 of her nephews were sent to a hospital with bullet wounds. Now, on September 17, 2019, Corey Morgan and Dwight Boone-Doty's trial had finally started. Corey pleaded not guilty and wouldn't take the plea deal of 25 years because he felt like he had a good chance of getting off for a lesser sentence due to his role in the crime. But the prosecutor argued that although he wasn't the one that done the shooting, he was still legally responsible for the killing. They laid out more than 2 weeks worth of evidence against him, which included witnesses pointing him out in a lineup and the searches he made on his cell phone on Facebook looking for Tyshawn's mother and father after the shooting. On top of that, the prosecutor stated 2 weeks before Tyshawn's murder, Dwight opened fire on a car that he thought was a rival member. She stated that he didn't even know who was in the car when he shot. All he had seen was a man with dreads. Now, although the guy with the dreads survived, Breonna Jenkins, who was also sitting in the car, did not. Dwight's defense team argued that no one actually seen him kill Tyshawn and said the one with all the motive in the world would be Corey because it was his brother who was killed and mother that got caught in the crossfire. Now, at first, you would think that he kind of had a good case, but the prosecutor then played the audio of Dwight speaking to an informant in jail where he described stalking Pierre Stokes and then confessed to killing Tyshawn while laughing about it. In the audio, he describes in great detail everything that went down.
He later made statements that he had, and I quote, "seen that go in his head, and Shorty, he was like he couldn't take it no more. Shorty couldn't take it no more," unquote. At one point, Doty set up a surveillance of Tyshawn's grandmother so he could kill her in order to draw out rival members. He also stated that his original plan was to torture this by and cutting off his fingers and his ears.
Once the recording had finished playing, Dwight's attorney argued that he only spoke about the murder to this informant, who was also a high-ranking gang member, to appear tougher to the other inmates and to survive, stating it wasn't based on facts. Now, regardless of whether anyone seen who done it or not, Dwight didn't have a chance. His DNA came up on the basketball, then the jury was shown an autopsy which suggested when he shot him, Pierre's son was actually facing him and it was at a close range. In their closing argument, Dwight's attorney continued to argue that no one saw him commit the crime and suggested police named their client as a suspect because the city was pressured to make a quick arrest after garnering national attention. In their last attempt for leniency, they asked the jury to consider his in an impoverished father's home and urged them to question the evidence in the case, noting that anything Dwight said about the murder in jail was not true. At the conclusion of a nearly 3-week-long trial, the Cook County jury deliberated for just over 2 hours, and on October 3rd, 2019, they found Dwight Boone-Doty guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 90 years in prison for his crime. Then a second jury found Corey Morgan guilty of the same charges the next day, and he was sentenced to 65 years in prison. As the verdict was being read off, neither one of them showed any emotion. Now, Dwight and Corey weren't the only ones being charged for this crime. The getaway driver, Kevin Edwards, was also charged and pled guilty in September of 2019 in exchange for a 25-year sentence. Then the next year, Corey's other brother, Anthony, was sentenced to 4 years in prison for buying the gun used to kill Tyshawn. Now, as for Pierre Stokes, Tyshawn's father, the revenge he took out on Dwight's girlfriend and 2 of her nephews in 2016 caused him to stand trial as well. The assistant state attorney stated Mr. Stokes, who was involved in that lifestyle, ultimately suffered an unspeakable loss with the calculated execution of his son, but despite this, he continued to engage in the same activity that started this initial cycle of violence. After deliberating for several hours, the Cook County jury found 33-year-old Pierre Stokes guilty of attempted murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and a gun charge, and he will be serving up to 31 years in prison. Even in a city where people are frequently caught in the crossfire of gang violence, this is one of the evilest things a person could do. The targeted killing of Tyshawn Lee shocked the city in the fall of 2015, and during that year, 468 other people were murdered in Chicago. That following year, which was 2016, saw a significant jump in murders with 769 people being killed. Now, like I said in the beginning, I'm not sure what's going on, but if you are from Chicago and you are watching this video, what do y'all think is the problem there? Is it from the lack of jobs? Do you believe it's the parents' fault? Or do you think it's this music they're listening to? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. All right, family, thank y'all all so much for tuning in. I hate I have to say this every video, but go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and turn those notifications on so you don't miss out on any of my videos. I hope everyone has had a wonderful, wonderful day, and until next time, stay mysterious, my friends.